I really love making this podcast. I do this show because I'm deeply interested in business, technology, and entrepreneurship. I bring on guests that I believe have unique insights in their field, the types of people that I could talk to and pick their brain, the types of people that genuinely interest me. And if I like talking to them, you probably like hearing them. That's my theory anyway. And so I like talking to entrepreneurs, CEOs, journalists, and of course, once in a while, venture capitalists. VCs deeply interest me. I really admire their bullish stance on various industries, companies, and products. Needless to say, I find them fun to talk to. If your job consists of being pitched various startup ideas, especially in a region like Silicon Valley, then it's safe to say you have a pretty strong grasp on the current state of innovation, whether you back a company or not. So that's why in 2017, when Apple Music announced this show, a new show called Planet of the Apps, I was really excited. I was excited not just to see the entrepreneurs on the program, but I was particularly keen to see the last stage of the show, where budding developers would pitch their app to a panel of prominent VCs. And one of the 4 VCs on the panel was someone by the name of Nicole Quinn. Nicole is a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. She's known for her bullish stance in regards to voice being the next major platform shift, and of course her keen eye for tomorrow's platforms, marketplaces, games, fintech, social, and e-commerce companies. Her portfolio consists of startups including the likes of com.com, Cameo, Goop, Rothy's, and Lady Gaga's cosmetic startup Haus Labs. A UK native, Nicole now calls San Francisco her home, where she joined this program via Zoom. But first, this is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. My conversation with Nicole Quinn, a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners, starts now. If we can start by just introducing yourself, who are you and what do you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Nicole Quinn. I'm a general partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. I have the wonderful job of being able to work with founders and listen to their stories and learn about nuggets of the future, because I think this job is so wonderful because we just get to hear from founders about the way that they view the future. And so I have the great pleasure of meeting these terrific founders on a daily basis, and have invested in companies such as Calm and Cameo and Goop, Lady Gaga's House, the AR gaming company Illumix, and several others.
So it's quite an impressive portfolio. And so you have quite an interesting job. You basically sort through deal flow, meet these inspiring founders. You're based in Silicon Valley, which is kind of the center of tech innovation at this point. But where were you originally from, and how'd you end up in Silicon Valley?
Well, as you can probably tell by the accent, I'm originally from England. My father was from Australia, my mother from the East End in London, and they were always very entrepreneurial. So my father started his first business when he was 18, and my first job was actually working for my father in his online pharmacy in the 1990s.
Oh, awesome. It's so innovative.
Very innovative, but unfortunately he was maybe ahead of his time because it was too early to do online pharmacies and they did not work out. But sometimes I say you learn more from the ones that don't work out than the ones that do. So I worked there. I always had a fascination with America. So I moved over to New York. I was working at Morgan Stanley on a lot of the technology IPOs like Facebook, Groupon, Pandora. But at the same time, I was angel investing and had been for about 10 years. And I loved that world. I found myself running out of the office at 5 o'clock every day to go and do angel investing and work with these young founders and help them hire and help them think about strategy. I was like, how do I get to do this full time? How do you make the side hustle into the main hustle? And so I decided I would leave Morgan Stanley. I would go to a fintech startup, which was also then back in London, fintech startup Nutmeg, online private wealth management. It's sort of Europe's equivalent of Wealthfront and Betterment.
Yeah.
And then I came out here to Stanford to go to business school, and I was working on a startup, which I pitched to Lightspeed. And Lightspeed are brilliant because they knew that my future was in venture. And so they gave me some terrific advice on the startup and helped me there. And then later they said, have you thought about venture? And so they became sort of a mentor to me over the couple of years while I was at business school. and really helped me tremendously. Some of my partners today, like Barry and Ravi and Jeremy, and then I joined them full time, which was about 5 years ago, and it's been a terrific journey.
So that's interesting. You started out with angel investing. I like meeting with people who I kind of respect and admire, and I definitely am interested in kind of the angel world. A lot of the people that I've talked to who do angel investing, at least part-time, have been previous startup founders with a little bit of money from an exit, let's say, right? And I'm assuming you did well before you started angel investing, but you probably didn't have $1 billion at your in your bank account.
I definitely didn't.
Right. So
No.
How do you go about angel investing when you are kind of bootstrapping that process yourself and you maybe don't have unlimited resources, but you're still, like you, were really interested in it?
This is a question that I discuss with business school students all the time, because I
Mm-hmm.
always say, to be a VC, the best way is to start acting like a VC today. And so one of those things is angel investing. We should go into some of the others as well. But how can you start angel investing if, as you say, you don't have a huge amount of money? And so for me, I've always just been a big saver. And so I always made sure to save a percentage of my salary and to put that to the side to then do some angel investing. And then for students, I say, often companies have, say, a 25K minimum check size. And you probably don't have 25K to just put into every single company. But between a group of you, you certainly might do. And
Syndicate.
so exactly. I
Yeah.
find if you're thinking about angel investing for the first time, doing an angel syndicate with your friends and just bringing people together means that you can brainstorm together and have great debates on whether this is an interesting company. And essentially, that's like the early part of what we do in VC as well. And then you can put in, say, 2.5K between 10 of you, and then make that 25K minimum check size. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really what I'd recommend.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And when you were angel investing, I definitely want to get to your venture, the world of venture later on. But roughly, what was the check size you were writing to some of these companies that kind of really got you in the door? Because you did mention, you had a lot of startups have a 25K minimum check size.
Yes, that's exactly what I was doing. I was doing 25K to 50K check sizes. Never actually wrote more than a 50K check size, because I think that for angel investing, it is about shots on goal. And so it's better to keep the check sizes smaller in the early days and invest in more. And listen, if something is really working, maybe you can put a little bit more in later as well. That's certainly how we do it in venture. And I think you can do something similar on the angel side as well.
Cool. And you're based in Silicon Valley, but your Twitter bio says you kind of all over the place. So San Francisco, LA, New York, London, those are all kind of big tech hubs. Where do you spend most of your time these days?
Right now, I'm definitely here at home. But honestly, there were times where maybe during 2018 and 2019, I pretty much split my time equally between London, New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, as one of my great companies. Cameo is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on a flight a lot. I am a big believer that the next big startup is not necessarily going to be built in Silicon Valley. There's many great minds here, but I believe in the democratization of these startups. I think that there's brilliant minds thinking about solving these problems all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we want to make sure to have our eyes and ears open to where these startups are emerging. And we're also not a VC that says, hey, you need to be here in Silicon Valley. I actually think, as with regards to building out your executive team, hiring your early engineers and product folks, you can do that in many different hubs. As you said, London, New York, LA, these are actually great technology hubs, and there's many more of them. You're in one, Toronto.
Yeah. Toronto is up and coming for sure. And when I kind of look at a venture firm, it seems like definitely firms tend to have investing theses, right? Theses, ideologies that they like to follow when they're looking at deal flow. But I'm sure every partner at a venture firm has their own, things they look for in terms of a really interesting opportunity. And I'm sure those pillars are different at the seed stage, to growth stage. But when you're looking at a seed stage company, do you tend to bet on the jockey? Do you bet on the horse? What specifically, do you focus on, like the founder? Do you focus on the idea? What are some of the things that you look at when you're kind of sorting through deal flow at an early stage?
So I think this question very much depends on what stage of the company you're looking at. So I
Yeah.
do believe that at the seed stage, it is so much about the founder, because often there's not even a product there at that point. And then if you're looking at the Series C, where we invested, in Zola and Goop and Calm, there's so many numbers there available. And so you can really put your analytical hat on and look at how terrific business is doing at that point. But I would say for me, when I invest primarily around the Series A stage, what I'm looking for are, yes, a great vision from the CEO. And I'm really trying to hone in on how the CEO thinks. And so looking at the insights that they're giving me about the world, because you and I might view the world as X, we might view the sky as blue, but they might come in and they might give you an insight around how the way that Gen Z are in relation to prior generations is so different that actually their insight means that the world is going to look pretty different in a few years to how it looks today. We certainly saw that in Snapchat in the early days, where Evan Spiegel was like, all the other social media products are all about looking great. Well, actually, it shouldn't be that way. It should be so that you can be your real self, your true self, and like pull these funny faces, and they don't need to be recorded and be on the internet forevermore. It can be more like a natural conversation where it's here today, gone tomorrow. There's no permanent evidence of it. So we love those insights. But then at the same time, I do look for some early data. And the reason being is that as a VC, you're a data point of one. So it doesn't really matter what the VC thinks in terms of whether I think Glossier, the top the orange right now, I think it's a terrific brand. But what is much, much more important is what the customer thinks. And so I say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should use them in that proportion. And you should always be listening to what the customer tells you. And so what I really look for, whether it be a fintech company or SaaS business, a marketplace, an e-commerce company, is whether a true brand is being built. I look at the leading indicators of a true brand, and that is A, repeat rate, B, referral rates. It's the NPS score, the feedback from the customer. It's the organic percentage, the word of mouth. Is this being talked about? It's also how people are talking about this on social media. And so those are some of the things that we look for and really show us that a brand is emerging.
And you'll dig into that for a specific company you're interested in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's great. And if you look at the VC landscape, especially in Silicon Valley pre-COVID, because this changes a lot, and we'll get to that. But do you think that kind of from the 2008 recession all the way to 2020, do you think there was a bubble specifically around companies being funded that shouldn't necessarily have due to their lack of a solid business model? I'm not asking specifically about Lightspeed, but in a broader sense. Do you think that was something that took place?
I think what you're saying is true if you look back on the year 2000, for example. And I think that the collapse that we saw thereafter was because of that. The companies were not generating profit, and actually in most cases they were not even generating revenue. And so that's very different to now. If you look at the e-commerce companies that we've invested in, pretty much all of those are now not just generating terrific revenue, but profitable. They're self-sustaining businesses that have very much focused on their unit economics and making sure to be profitable. And myself as a board member, I always want to make sure that these companies control their own destiny and have the power to stay alive in this world. If you want to win, you've got to be around. So let's make sure you're around. And maybe that means, in these times of COVID, making sure you have at least 24 months runway. But what's better than that is making sure you're profitable, or at least so that you know that you can pull 2, 3, 4 different levers to be profitable. So that path to profitability is the most important thing for me. And so if I look at Rothy's, terrific shoe company.
Yeah, great brand.
It's such a great brand.
Yeah,
I don't know whether
fan.
you know.
No, I'm a fan. Yes, I'm a fan. I don't own any Rothys, but I've actually found out about them probably 2 months ago through you on Twitter. And yeah, really admire it. The brand's really cool.
Brilliant. Well, I don't know whether you know, but they recently launched handbags. And so it's interesting because people talk about it as a shoe brand, but it's actually so much more than that. It's a sustainable brand that has had a terrific collection of shoes and always will do. And now on top of that has handbags. And that company has always been very lean and has not spent beyond its means. The CEO, the two founders are just terrific, Roth and Stephen. And so that focus on profitability, I just think is incredibly important. And also the public investor in me looks at these companies and is like, wow, that's a great business that the public markets would love, as opposed to a lot of these businesses that have been IPOing recently that the public markets have real issues with the fact that they're not even going to be profitable this year or next year. So I do think that in these times we're being more and more focused on the business models. And to your point, there have been companies that haven't been, but those times are changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the most immediate example that comes to mind, and I don't think Lightspeed funded it, but WeWork, that was like your typical, that didn't end well for, investors in the later stage and kind of a lack of focus on profitability. The way I see it, just if you're profitable, you just have more control in every manner. You can kind of control your own destiny. You're not relying on any form of institutional venture investors or some angel to swoop in and save the day. But on that note, yeah.
I completely agree with you, but I would say that you want to find that perfect balance between profit and growth.
Yeah.
And so it's always finding that true balance. And so maybe you want to bring down your profitability or even not be profitable, focus on growth, but just know how you'll get to profitability. Mm-hmm. So I would say the most important thing is just knowing what levers you would pull to get to profitability.
Yes, but don't you think if on the WeWork example, if they had these leases signed for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and something like this happens, a COVID example, which everyone kind of knew there was a recession coming, and no one kind of knew exactly when and how, and it's probably still going to happen if it hasn't already. The part that I have a tough time with, and I'm not asking you to defend WeWork in any way, but I'm just curious to hear your perspective on this. If you were signed into a 10-year lease and you have a bunch of startups who can kind of go in and out of business like this, paying on a monthly basis, and when you have max capacity, you're still not profitable. Isn't that a dangerous business model? Because if people pull out, you're signed to these leases, and if they weren't profitable at max capacity, they're definitely not profitable now. Do you understand? Do you hear what I'm saying there?
I hear what you're saying. I actually spent the first, call it 5 years of my career focused on these retailers. Okay. The retailers in the UK let themselves into leases that are between 10 and 25 years.
It's crazy.
And so it's exactly what you're talking about. A lot of these businesses have EBITDA margins of 1%. Mm-hmm. And so when you go into a recession, you certainly are not in the positive anymore, and you're locked into these leases and wanting to get out of these leases. I mean, living through and working through the 2008 recession was a really tough one, because that was when a lot of our high streets, every other store was boarded up, at least in the UK. Mm-hmm. And so that is certainly something that it's not just a WeWork specific issue, it's brick and mortar overall, which is certainly why we have got far more exposure to the online companies in our portfolio than brick and mortar, and therein lies the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think WeWork was necessarily a tech company, and most tech companies don't have that upfront cost. That was a real estate startup. Coming up, my conversation with Nicole Quinn continues, but first, a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of The Ones Who Succeed is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes in business, marketing, technology, design, and more. You can take classes in social media marketing, video editing, entrepreneurship, you name it, they've got it. So whether you're trying to deepen your professional skill set, start a side hustle, or just explore a new passion, Skillshare is there to keep you learning and thriving. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the call to action. Skillshare is offering the Ones Who Succeed listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes, all for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/succeed. Again, that's Skillshare.com/succeed. That link is how they know the Ones Who Succeed sent you to start your first 2 months now. You can find that link in the description of this podcast, and it would be awesome if you can support our show by supporting our sponsors. So one last time, visit Skillshare.com/succeed to start your first 2 months of Skillshare Premium today. And thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the show. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. Welcome back to the program. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. And I'm about halfway through my conversation with Lightspeed Venture Partner Nicole Quinn, so we're going to jump right back into that conversation. I really want to hear your opinion on this kind of direct-to-consumer boom. Because from 2008, maybe 2010, and kind of up until this point, it seems like D2C brands have been kind of popping up all over the place and doing quite well. Like every kind of form of almost every category I've seen that you know, a category of luxury, shoes, handbags, like you mentioned, Rothy's, Allbirds, Glossier, all these kind of brands that used to be in department stores are kind of evolving to these really interesting direct-to-consumer brands. Have you seen a boom kind of take place in the last 10 years?
We certainly have seen a boom in direct-to-consumer over the last 10 years. And I think it's because of the way that young people are shopping and what they want from a true brand. Mm-hmm. And so people are saying, no, I don't want to buy the exact same CPG product that my mother bought, that my grandmother bought, that has literally been sitting on the shelves of Safeway for the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. I want something that speaks to me and speaks to me in my language and has the same values as me, and really like this colors popping and this product popping and the ingredients in it really are what I'm looking for and craving. So I think that trend is something that is here to stay. I would say there's like a new layer coming on top, which is that those brands very much spoke to millennials. And now we're thinking about brands that speak to Gen Z, and those are going to be different again. And so Gen Z really want brands that have a value, that have a strong statement, a strong position. And they care far less about, I would say, some of the more materialistic things, and they care more about environmentally sustainable brands and environmentally friendly and sustainable companies like Rothy's. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, and they're just going to be demanding that there be natural, clean products. Maybe they're recyclable. And so as I think about where the boom has come from, where it's going to go, that's one of the shifts that I'm expecting, as well as for these brands to have more of a focus on their business model, as we just discussed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I think the difference between like the D2C kind of boom and the food delivery app boom is the D2C boom is really customer driven. Like you were right, you kind of nailed it, right? Gen Z really cares about the values of these brands, and as a result, some enterprising entrepreneurs kind of saw that and decided to disrupt a bunch of industries. And you Lightspeed, but specifically you, have invested in quite an interesting roster of not only entrepreneurs, but celebrity entrepreneurs. Gwyneth Paltrow, Lady Gaga, Jessica Alba. So, I've heard you talk about this, so I want to try to avoid saying the same questions you've kind of always been asked, but do you think it was harder or easier to back these high-profile individuals?
It's a really interesting question, because you've got to ask yourself, do you want to do what's easy in this life? Sometimes I think the things that are easy in this world are not the ones that are worthwhile doing. Mm-hmm. And so whether they be a celebrity or otherwise, a lot of the founders that we invest in are people that they're not easy. They're people that are inspiring and, could change this world. Mm-hmm. That's the way that I see any founder that I work with. And so if they're a celebrity or otherwise, but they're coming to us with an idea, I see them just as a founder. I see them as an entrepreneur. And I think that's the most important thing, because when Lady Gaga came to us and said, I have 3 passions in this world, that is music, that is acting, and that is beauty. And I expect to spend, a third of my time on each. And now 2 years later, she's still very consistent around that. And every board meeting will always say that she's just the chairwoman of the company and very, very involved. No product or name or model or color goes out from Haus Labs without having Lady Gaga deeply involved in it. And so we're speaking to them as an entrepreneur, as we would with any entrepreneur, and we're still looking for those insights, and we're still looking at the way that they envisage the company. But the big difference is that if you're working with a celebrity, it is far easier and far faster to convert 100 million fans into a customer than it is to acquire 100 million new customers. So that is something that gives them an instant running start. I used to be a 100-meter sprinter and love going off the blocks at the beginning. And so I think if you can give somebody a running start to their business in whatever way that is, then that's only a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think the kind of distribution, and to be clear, the brands that you've backed that involve celebrities, it seems like almost every celebrity has a brand, but you're right. It seems like especially Lady Gaga is way more involved in her brand than someone who is kind of just outsourcing it and white labeling products and slapping a sticker on it and swipe up Instagram stories. So I think that's really cool. And I want to pivot to talking about something that I've been really interested in. And I've heard you and Jeremy talk about being very bullish on this next wave platform shift to voice. And this is something I've been really interested in watching for a long, long time. And it seemed like around 2016, 2017, there was maybe a little bit of 2018, there was this kind of huge boom that voice is the future. It's coming. Get ready. Uber built the skill. You have like platforms like VoiceFlow that enable it, that make it very easy to build skills pop up. And then kind of everyone looked around and, it didn't really seem to have as dramatic of a influence as the mobile shift did when mobile kind of was here. However, in the wake of COVID-19, people are not as interested in touching things. And as a result, I've seen more and more talk about voice being really beneficial and useful in all sorts of regards. I had Mark Cuban on the podcast, and he's really interested in using voice and Alexa and integrating it with the Dallas Mavericks in stadiums and things like that. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of take on something, it's all about kind of making this useful. And so what is your opinion on voice, and what do you mean by you're bullish on voice? And then I have a bunch of follow-up questions, but I first want to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So in a nutshell, I would say we're in between platforms right now. There was web, and then there was mobile, and we are very much in between. It's been over a decade since a new platform emerged on the consumer side of things. And so we don't yet know what the new platform might be. Could be VR, could be AR, could be drones. I personally believe that it will be voice. I think that if you look at how many Alexa and OK Googles are in our home, I actually view them as a Trojan horse. So they have been wheeled into our homes.
That's a great analogy.
We don't yet know what they're going to do.
That's awesome.
So right now they play music and Exactly. Yeah. You ask them for the weather, maybe do a list on them or set a timer. But I mean, that's really just a nice looking Trojan horse to look at. And we don't yet know its true potential and what's going to really be inside this. So I'm super bullish, as you said, to find out what the true potential is. And we are already investing in this. So, Calm is probably one of the great audio apps of our time.
I am a subscriber. Yeah, every day.
Very pleased.
Daily Calm.
I mean, especially in these COVID times. I mean, anxiety's high. People can't get to sleep.
That's why I joined. That's why I joined. Yeah.
Good. And then my partner, Jana, she invested in a great company called Volley. And so Volley have an amazing founder, Max Child, who has a really interesting vision around the future of voice. And he's been able to create all these different trivia and quiz and game shows that you can just ask your Alexa for, and it'll go into it that way. And really linking them together. So it's a true community of different apps through Alexa. By the way, I'm very pleased that this is the one room in my house that I do not have an Alexa.
I have headphones because mine's over there. Yeah, a bunch of times. So warning for our listeners in case it hasn't gone off already. Yeah, no, I think that's very insightful. And I think the main problem I see with this space, and I'm definitely optimistic. I think if right now, in regards to all the options that I've been presented, VR, AR, drones, all will be important. But I think voice is essentially the most promising, probably because it's the most similar to mobile and web in the sense that it's a platform that you can build on top of in the form of skills and actions. But the big issue I see is that there hasn't really been a breakout app yet, right? So Lightspeed famously funded Snapchat in the early days. I think you guys were the first investor, right? Jeremy did that.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so first investor in Snapchat, and Snapchat totally beautifully rode the wave of mobile very well. And I'm sure there have been challenges along the way, but it is an example where it really just couldn't be a website. It wouldn't have found product market fit. I don't think teenagers would have really wanted to go on snapchat.com and drag an image and some text and send it. So that's a really great example of harnessing the mobile wave. But the biggest thing I see is that there hasn't really been a breakout app in voice. So what do you think it will take for there to be a breakout app in voice, kind of an Alexa skill or a Google Home action?
There's one thing I would say which I think will really dramatically change this. And let's just make the comparison to mobile. So when we had, our original phones, there were all these different apps that were being built, but there was no way to find them until the App Store came along. And then with the introduction of the App Store, you could find all those different apps. Now, you compare that to voice. Voice is also, there's lots going on in there, but we don't know how to find things. Search and discoverability in voice is tremendously hard. And so we need the equivalent of an app store to be able to find all the brilliant new applications that are within voice. And that probably looks different to an app store because it's not visual. So maybe it looks like you asking for the weather and then them knowing you so that they make suggestions to you and say, hey, you've looked at X in the past, you want to look at Y today. And that's something that I hope that many of the smart brains are working on, because I do think that when we fix that search and discoverability side of voice, it could explode.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think even the Alexa skill store now is just terrible. It's really bad. I have it on my phone. It's like a side panel in the bottom of an app. You really have to search for it. I mean, if I was running the show there, I think that would be the number one priority. How can we make our developers really stand out? Because it seems like, like Google and Apple kind of competed in the mobile wave. It seems like Amazon and Google are really going to compete in the voice wave. So I think that's really interesting. But the other thing that I think about a lot in this space is the idea of usefulness. Because I read an article that was definitely did not think voice was the next wave, and I read these all the time. I just try to kind of hear more perspectives. And the one of the points this article made was essentially the idea that having a phone is just too easy, right? Like you can swipe and check your email, you could do it very quickly. And part of the reason I think voice hasn't caught on is A, discoverability, but B, also practicality in regards to the skills being built. And that's another comparison you can make to even the mobile store, right? Like when the iPhone came out, I downloaded a game that enabled you to tilt your phone and it looked like you were pouring beer. It was really stupid, but then we have Snapchat. And so do you think there'll be interesting use cases for the usefulness, for the practicality factor in regards to these Alexa skills and home actions?
So I personally do. I believe that there's a huge amount that we'll be able to do with them. And so if you look at your phone, you're already using your phone for actually a lot of different audio use cases. And again, like this goes back to the fact that you have two ears and one mouth. I would say for VCs, it's certainly not our job to be like, okay, this is the use case that people are going to use. What we want is to hear the insights from brilliant founders around why there is a use case emerging, or why they believe that a new use case will emerge, and then I have true belief that we will see some of those come to play.
Yeah, see someone capitalize on it. So a few more questions here. With all this talk about the platform shifts going to voice, but you're right, we haven't really seen a new platform disruption in 10 years since kind of the mobile wave. Do you still see an opportunity on mobile to build apps? Because I've talked to some smart people who think the golden days of the mobile app store is kind of gone, and it's just way too competitive now, and it's almost a cliche to build an app. What are your thoughts on that?
It is certainly harder to gain traction with an app now than the way it was before. And the reason being is that if you want to be top of mind as an app, then you really want to be on somebody's home screen. That's where they're looking every day, and that's where it's, hey, it's top of mind. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to use it. And you ultimately want to be a daily use case for an app. That's where, the true value is in many of these. And by this point, people have their home screen apps. And so in the past, they were desperately looking for more to bring on to the ones that they'd be using with the most regularity. Whereas now we have a lot of our habits built up and we have our home screen apps. But I would say that because of what's happened over the last couple of months, there's great change happening in the world. And so that can be a shift to allow new apps to emerge. And so, for example, maybe Uber and Lyft were two apps that were on your phone. Maybe you had a couple of airline apps also on your phone. And in these times, those maybe be moved to page 2 and 3, creating space for new ones to emerge. And maybe that's Zoom, maybe that's Slack, but maybe that's also new apps that are being developed at the moment that are really helping people connect with one another. I'm very bullish on this whole space around virtual conferences, virtual meetups, virtual connections at the moment. I'm a big believer that the habits that we build up over this time will be sticky afterwards. It won't be 100% sticky. We will go back in part to the way we were before, but we won't go back 100% to what life was like. There will be a new normal. And in that new normal, there will be those new apps.
And my last question for you. As a VC, you get pitched so many opportunities. You probably don't remember every single pitch you've got because you've had many, but I'm sure you've missed on some great companies. Can you talk a little bit about some of those missed opportunities in a playful manner?
Yes, of course. So I will first tell you about Glossier, given you are wearing the Glossier hoodie.
Yes.
Glossier to me is just a brilliant brand. It really shows all those leading indicators that I mentioned earlier. People love it. People tell one another about it. People come back time and time again. They refer their friends. They don't just buy the makeup product. They wear the hoodies like you. And they're literally going out into the world and they are
advertising.
A personal billboard. Yes, they're advertising it. And so I love that. I think that we're going to see those true brands coming alive outside of e-commerce. I think that we're seeing that in SaaS companies with Zoom and Slack. We're seeing that in fintech companies with people saying, oh my gosh, like Robinhood has just been so tremendous. It's really helped me. I just made X amount of money on it. You should try it too. And so I think that we're really seeing those true brands emerge across multiple different sectors. And then, is it helpful if I give you a second one as well?
Yeah, of course. That would be great.
The second one that I would say is I was still getting to know Lightspeed when I sat in on a really interesting pitch. And the pitch was these incredibly smart people who had been working at Google and had worked on the Google Maps. And they'd come up with this game. And the game had some traction, but there was no IP behind the game. And we said to them, it was probably a little bit too early because it was essentially pre-launch for a new game that they were developing. And but we felt that they should think about IP, and then we'd love to speak to them afterwards. So they did think about IP. They went to Nintendo. They came up with Pokemon.
Oh no! No.
We missed Pokemon Go.
Oh no!
Niantic Labs. I think the learning is invest in those brilliant mind people.
Yeah, bet on the jockey.
Exactly, bet on the jockey. If you're going to suggest IP, then great, but invest when they get that IP as well at the time, because my gosh, gaming, much like social, when it works so quickly, and it takes off. Yeah, and so you don't get that valuation that you want after that happens so quickly. So those are a couple I will share with you.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Nicole Quinn, thank you for coming on the program. Great to get to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Nicole Quinn, one of the ones who succeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really helps us out. Or why not tell a friend? Doing that helps new listeners discover the show. I really appreciate it. If you want to see clips from the show and stay up to date with what I'm working on, you could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Campbell J. Barron. And my YouTube channel is my name, Campbell Barron. If you've made it to the end of the show, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Campbell Barron, and I'll be back in no time.